There's this piece of technology that a ton of us use literally every single day, but we probably don't think twice about it. I'm talking about the command line terminal that lives right inside your browser or your code editor. For years, they've all been built on the same foundation, but that's all changing. A quiet revolution is happening, and it's a move from just copying the past to actually compiling the future. Right? If you're a developer, of course you have. It's that little window, usually at the bottom of your editor, where all the action happens. You're running commands, installing packages, wrangling Git. It feels so seamless, so native. But really, it's this incredibly complex piece of engineering that's running inside a web view. And what's wild is that for the longest time, pretty much all of these web-based terminals, from the biggest IDEs you can think of down to the tiniest open source projects, they've all relied on one single library to make that magic happen. And that library is xterm.js. Yeah, it's pretty much the undisputed king, the Goliath of web terminals. Its reach is just massive, and for years, it has single-handedly set the standard for what a terminal in the browser should be. But what if that standard, the one that everybody's using, has some really deep, fundamental flaws? What if the very way it was built created these limitations that we're only now starting to figure out how to solve? So the real problem actually comes down to the approach. See, the goal with xterm.js was super ambitious. Create a perfect replica of a native terminal. But the method? Well, the method was to do it all by hand, to re-implement every single command, every character, every weird little quirk from scratch in JavaScript. And that analogy, it really hits the nail on the head. Imagine trying to rewrite a masterpiece novel in a totally new language, line by line. You're just bound to miss some of the subtlety, some of that nuance that made the original work so perfectly. And those little misses, they can add up to some pretty big problems. And we're not talking about minor bugs here. We're talking about issues that are baked right into the architecture of doing this by hand, of re-implementing instead of, something else. Let's dig into what those are. So what does this actually break? Well, two big things. First, complex scripts. Think languages like Devanagari or Arabic. They can just completely fail to render correctly. They look garbled. And second, some of the more advanced terminal commands, like xtp-susg, are just not supported at all, which really limits what you can do. Okay, so if rewriting by hand is the problem, what's the solution? Well, it's a completely different way of thinking, and it's all wrapped up in a new library called Ghosty Web. Instead of rewriting the novel, it's like bringing the original author to a new country. And the key, the secret sauce that makes this all possible, is WebAssembly, or WASM for short. The easiest way to think about it is like a universal translator for the web. It lets you take code that was written for a native desktop app and just run it directly in your browser, and at blazing fast speeds. And that is exactly what Ghosty Web does. It doesn't start from scratch. Nope. It takes the original, battle-tested code from the native Ghosty terminal, which is already a super high-performance emulator, and it compiles that exact same code into WebAssembly. It's not a copy. It's the real deal, just running in a new place. And that, right there, is the entire game changer. It's not an imitation of a terminal, it is a proper terminal implementation, just running in the browser. All the nuance, all the tricky edge cases, all the performance wins, they all just come along for the ride. Okay, so this is all very cool from a technical standpoint, but what does it actually mean for you and me, day to day? Let's talk about the real-world impact of this shift. Remember those rendering problems? Well, with Ghosty Web's proper grapheme handling, which, by the way, it gets for free from the native code, complex scripts just work. They display perfectly. For developers and users all over the world, this is a massive step forward for making our tools truly global. And what about those commands that weren't supported? Well, having full support for advanced features means we can finally have richer, more interactive, and visually complex command line apps running perfectly inside a browser IDE. This could seriously unlock a whole new generation of powerful tools. And here's the kicker. You'd think that porting a whole native application to the web would result in some huge bloated file, right? Get this. The entire WebAssembly bundle for Ghosty Web is only around 400 kilobytes. That is shockingly small and efficient. So let's just recap. What you're getting here is a true high-fidelity terminal, not a rewrite. It has better global support and way more advanced features. It's incredibly lightweight with zero dependencies. And maybe the best part of all, It's designed to be API compatible with xterm.js, which could make switching over as simple as changing one line of code. This whole thing isn't just about swapping out one library for another. This shift, from re-implementing things in JavaScript to compiling native code with WebAssembly, this represents a really fundamental change in how we think about building powerful applications for the web. Which leaves us with this one really fascinating question. For years, web tools have been trying to catch up to the speed, the power, and the feel of their desktop counterparts. But with technologies like WebAssembly bringing the actual native code into the browser, are we finally about to close that gap for good? It's a pretty exciting time to find out.